This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 6th of July 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm JM.
And I am Miss K. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, tough times as cost of meals shoots up. The Standard, why Uhuru won't visit Ukambani. And The Star, Uhuru's team plans to market Raila in Central.
Quite boring headlines.
Quite boring headlines.
I find them very matter of fact.
They are. But at least one of them has inspired all our thoughts. 2J, do you want to take us to some thoughts?
Yeah, through The Star. So we know this, that Uhuru Kenyatta has told the country that the 2022 presidential winner will not come from the Kikuyu or Kalenjin communities. This is because to circulate the presidency between the same two communities is a crime against the other 41. But in our view, Kikuyus and Kalenjins have a political disease that we like to call libido dominandi, the need to dominate.
Yes.
And that is why they created this Ferrari presidency that has only 2 seats. And it is in the interest of Ruto and Mount Kenya to keep this Ferrari alive. But the handshake was designed to try something new. Uhuru and Raila want a Matatu presidency with more seats to accommodate the rest of the country. So what is wrong with that? But I actually want to address the elephant in the room, that picking a running mate will be Ruto's biggest headache. Because without Kikuyus, Ruto is nothing. Let me explain why. So to become president, William Ruto must have a Kikuyu running mate. He has zero option about this. He has flirted with the Mount Kenya region so much that he has to make good on his actions. For a fact, he will not choose a hustler, because a hustler is about class. But to become president, Ruto has to focus on tribe. So this means that he is misusing hustlers to get the Ferrari presidency with 2 seats. 1 seat for Kikuyus and the other for himself. But I repeat, Uhuru Kenyatta has already told us, and the country has heard, you cannot rotate the presidency between Kikuyus and Kalenjins for 60 years and then 60 more. This 2-tribe rotation is what we call ethnic majoritarianism. And the majoritarian system is built to exclude. And since independence, we have excluded 41 communities. The answer to this problem is an electoral system that promotes free and fair elections, accommodation of the minority, and proportional representation. The answer is BBI. Simple. So if Ruto cannot live without Kikuyus, the domination of 2 tribes must come to an end, and BBI is committed to expanding the executive to promote inclusion, then the DP has bet on the wrong horse, and 2022 will expose that.
That's right. Yeah.
I do like those thoughts, and I think I'm going to put it another way, but I will still talk about the importance of Kikuyus and why they should also be proportionally represented at the top.
Yes.
According to The Star, the president's allies are planning to give Raila Odinga a grand tour of central Kenya in preparation for 2022, with or without BBI. And I think that Raila should do a grand tour of the central region, because as we have said in the past, Gema will make or break the presidency in 2022. A rapid mapping of the power and influence of the Gema communities shows that they are dominant in 11 of the 47 counties in the country. 10 of these counties are recorded in the top 50% of revenue generating counties. And in the 2017 general election, out of the 19 million registered voters in the country, 5.5 million or 28% came from the Gema communities. So make no mistake, the Gema vote is important.
Indeed.
And they know it. That is why in 2018, the Kikuyu Council of Elders openly said that the Kikuyu community would negotiate with all presidential candidates and support whomever gave them the best deal. According to The Star, today, several Mount Kenya tycoons are in agreement that Raila is the region's best bet. But I have to ask a question. If the Gema elite want to retire Ruto, will the Gema masses support them? I think the 1992 election, when the Gema vote was split between Kenneth Matiba and Mwai Kibaki, permitting Moi to win should be a lesson to Gema. In 1992, Daniel Arap Moi won the election with only 36% of the vote. Kenneth Matiba was second with 26% of the vote, and Mwai Kibaki third with 20% of the vote. Now, if the Gema vote had not split, Moi would have been ousted 10 years early with a combined 46% vote, 10% more than he had. Well, anyway, if Raila is touring central Kenya, he's doing so because he's a wise politician. And as a wise politician, he knows that if the Gema interests are not secured, it will be difficult for the next administration, his or any other, to contain the Gema nation, especially if they organize themselves outside the state to secure their economic interests.
Very good point, yeah.
So, I want to talk a little bit about manipulation of the electorate through fear and hope in the context of the Star newspaper. So as the headline states, Uhuru's team plans to market Raila in central Kenya. And the strategy to sell Raila will either be that of fear or hope. And this is because, in the words of J.J. Rousseau, fear and hope are the two greatest instruments in the governance of men. Fear is the correct tactic, I think, to use for 2022. And here's how it is likely to work. Theoretically speaking, companies and governments, and even practically speaking, they habitually manipulate us with fear tactics. And that is because we have faulty judgments. You know, we're easily driven into panic. In the pharmaceutical industry, for example, across the world, there's what you call disease mongering. Now, disease mongering means that pharmaceutical companies don't market pills to people who need them. Instead, they try to convince customers that something is wrong with them and it can be cured with a pill. That is why pharmaceutical companies spend so much money on marketing. They earn more by convincing people that they are sick. Pharmaceuticals are also known to create, these panels of key opinion shapers and leaders, the Cambridge Analyticas of this world, but for the pharmaceutical industry, that would include people from, a medical background who convince customers that they need the drug.
Yeah.
So that's marketing in the corporate, domain. And those are the same tricks that politicians usually use to manipulate the electorate through the politics of fear. Political ads and narratives which appeal to our emotions, those are usually crafted and then disseminated widely, rather than presenting us with factual information. There's lots of case studies in the US elections. You had after 9/11, there's weapons of mass destruction that was used to drum up support for the Iraq war, which later turned out to be completely false. Now, in 2022, this is the basket of methodologies that shall be relied upon. And as we drive this campaign to market Raila in central Kenya, here's my hypothesis on how that will go. The narrative that sold Raila Odinga as a boogeyman during the 2007 and the 2017 elections will be flipped and used on William Ruto. William Ruto will be our new, or let me say, William Ruto will be Mount Kenya's new boogeyman.
Yeah.
The new object of aggression.
And I think the interesting thing is that on the face, not even on the face of it, in the depth of it, he's such an easy person to dismantle. In fact, I was looking at things on Twitter today where they were talking about the printing of hats and t-shirts for UDA during the Kiambaa by-election. And somebody asked a very important question. How can you talk about supporting Mount Kenya and hustlers and small businesses, yet you chose to have those t-shirts and hats printed in Dubai instead of choosing a hustler in Kenya to do that job for you?
That's right.
It's so easy to dismantle this boogeyman because that's what he is. Right?
Very, very true. I liked how you referenced the use of advertisements for pharmaceuticals. I mean, they use every type of symptom to make it broad-based and inclusive of everyone. Do you sleep at night and wake up in the morning? You need this pill. Anyway.
Don't Google your symptoms. Don't Google your symptoms.
We have a three-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines for you. We ask ourselves three questions. Is the headline topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and thoughtful or just plain lazy? Daily Nation, tough times as cost of meals shoots up. I'd say we toss that. The Standard, why Uhuru won't visit Ukambani, and The Star, Uhuru's team plans to market Raila in central Kenya.
Can we award like half a winning headline?
A half a headline. The best of the worst.
The best of the worst, the Star. At least it inspired some thought, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It did. So we give the Star our best of the worst headline. And now on to our final thought. But before we get there, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification button.
And now our final thought. Today is inspired by a book entitled Bull Jobs by David Graeber. So in the year 1930, economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that by century's end, technology would have advanced sufficiently that countries like Great Britain or the United States would have achieved a 15-hour work week. And just for context, most people work an average of 40 hours a week. So we're talking about cutting it by more than half. And there's every reason to believe that he was right. In technological terms, we are capable of this. And yet it didn't happen. Instead, technology has been organized to make us work even more. In order to achieve this, jobs have had to be created that are effectively pointless. So in this book, David Graeber, an anthropologist, seeks a diagnosis and a source for what he calls useless jobs that no one wants to talk about. And he thinks that these jobs are everywhere. Empty jobs are positions in which the workers believe their labor has no meaning, helps no one, and contributes nothing to society. Basically, people who are paid to sit around, answer phones, and pretend to be useful. And a lot of BS jobs are just manufactured positions with no real utility in the world. But they have to exist in order to justify the careers of the people performing them. I think he says in the book also that this is a very Western problem. But if they went away tomorrow, these BS jobs, he says it would make no difference at all. And he says that is how you know a job is BS. If we suddenly eliminated teachers or rubbish collectors or construction workers, security or whatever, it would really matter. We would notice their absence. But if a BS job goes away, we're no worse off. So then the author asks, why are employers in the public and private sector behaving like the bureaucracies of the old Soviet Union, paying workers that they don't seem to need? And he says that since these jobs make no economic sense, their function must be political. A population kept busy with fake work is less likely to revolt. My question is this. Clearly, this is a Western problem. Is it an African one yet? Or is it even a problem at all?
Well, I think I'll try to answer that question. According to today's author, there are 5 basic types of BS jobs. And I will name them all, then give you a brief description of each. The first type of BS job is flunkies. The second is goons. The third is duct tapers. The fourth is box tickers. And the fifth is task masters. I'll describe the first type of BS job, flunkies. A flunky job is, for flunky jobs are those that exist only or primarily to make someone else look or feel important. And he gives an example that throughout recorded history, rich and powerful men and women have tended to surround themselves with servants, clients, sycophants, and minions. Many of those people do some actual work, but there's usually a certain portion whose job it is to just stand around and look impressive. The modern day example of a flunky is the doorman. And in some countries, such as Brazil, buildings still have uniformed elevator operators whose entire job is to push the button for you.
Wow.
Even in Kenya, just before COVID, you know, some establishments in town as well as buildings. That's a very important job.
The doorman.
But it makes a client feel really good.
Important, yeah.
Flunky.
Very important. So that's an important job. I disagree.
It's a BS job. Anyway, the second type of BS job is goons. The author does not mean actual gangsters, but he's referring to people whose jobs are aggressive. They have an aggressive element, but they only exist because other people employ them. And just like literal goons, these jobs also they have a largely negative impact on society. His example of a goon job is the National Armed Forces. I'm waiting for you, Jim. According to the author, countries need armies only because other countries have armies. He also categorizes lobbyists, PR specialists, telemarketers, and corporate lawyers as goons.
I'm going to now agree with JM. I disagree with the National Armed Forces being a BS job.
Yeah.
We need it.
Do we really?
Yes, we do.
Are we going to war?
Who would have built the Lamu fort if we didn't have the military?
Exactly. Huh?
Right?
And who would have revived KMC and all these things? who would have been running Nairobi Metropolitan Service today?
Keep going.
Anyway,
Keep
moving
going.
on. The third type of BS job are called duct tapers. Duct tapers are employees whose job exists only because of a glitch or a fault in the organization. So they are there to solve a problem that ought not to exist. The most obvious example of duct tapers are underlings whose jobs are to undo damage done by sloppy or incompetent superiors.
Interesting.
So the superior is superfluous.
No comment.
The fourth type of BS job are called box tickers. So the author terms the term box ticker to refer to employees who exist only or primarily to allow an organization to be able to claim it is doing something that in fact it is not doing. According to the author, fact-finding commissions to investigate maybe corruption in government are box-ticking jobs. They are a way of telling the public that the government is doing something it really is not.
And those are very popular in the UK. I think they have over 20, 30 commissions every single year.
Yeah.
To fact
Public
find.
inquiries to fact find.
BS jobs. The fifth and final type of BS job are called taskmasters. Now, taskmasters fall into two subcategories. Type 1 contains those whose role consists entirely of assigning work to others, like they're an unnecessary supervisor, and they don't really do the job. Someone else does it, but they just assign you the task.
Yeah.
Type 2 contains those whose primary role is to create BS tasks for others to do, to supervise the BS jobs, and even to entirely create new BS job categories. You can refer to these as special taskmasters, as BS generators. And the questions for the day are you in a BS job? If so, which category do you fall into? And is your job partly BS, mostly BS, or purely and entirely BS?
Oh gosh, we're gonna send people into depression.
Questions. Absolutely. Now, modern working patterns and times go against nature and force many of us into miserable working lives, says the author. So many of us have experienced the frustration of having to sit in an office until 5 p.m., even though we've finished our work for the day. Yeah, it hasn't always been this way. The idea that an employer owns you for certain hours of a day is in fact just a recent development in human history. Throughout much of history, humans have worked in a cycle involving occasional spurts of energy followed by a more relaxed approach.
Very true.
In feudal societies, for example, the author says, lords, knights, and all these people, the landowners, they would be almost completely idle apart from the occasional brief periods of work. In their case, they were bearing arms and fighting. Peasants, meanwhile, clearly had to, work a little bit more frequently. But even then, their work was nothing like a 9-to-5 job. In fact, the life of a farmer usually begins at about 4 a.m. It ends just before noon.
What a life.
And if they produced what they needed to, they were done. There's also seasons of harvesting, of planting, and so on. So time only became a concept in work practices with the advent of clock towers in the 14th century and domestic clocks and watches in the late 1700s. Suddenly, a worker's time was a commodity to be bought, which ushered in the mindset of modern day employers who say, you're on the clock, I'm not paying you to sit idle. And this has been a key driver of the BSing of working life. And the author's own first job, he tells us, as a restaurant dishwasher is a great example.
Yeah.
The first time a major rush came on, he and his two fellow washers got competitive. Dishes were washed in record time, and they then kicked back with a cigarette and a drink outside the restaurant. But then the boss turned up and told them that they could relax on their own. They should relax only on their own time, and he ordered them back to work. After asking what exactly they should do, they had, after all, completed their tasks. They were told to scrub the kitchen. When informed that they had already done this, the boss told them, do it again. Yeah, do it again.
Yeah.
The author was taught a lesson. In a bullshit job, if you finish your actual work, you can't just kick back and relax. Even though this is what farmers, peasants, and millions of others throughout history have naturally done. Instead, you must engage in degrading, pointless, busy work. That's what he says.
Wow. What a mess.
Just sit there. This is why there are people who would leave the office and leave the jacket there just to give the appearance that they're still working that time they've kicked back and relaxed.
Yeah.
Today we had, I wouldn't call it a winning headline, the best of the worst from the Star. And I'd like to leave you on pointless work with a quote from Peter Drucker, the father of management. And he says, "There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all."
Oh, God. Yeah.
Do have a great evening.